So this is night one of my creative writing course, and I thought this would be good for this assignment because there are a lot of little activities in here that I do. Mostly on that first night, it's about trying to acclimate everybody. So we start with a little introduction with a fun kind of thing where everybody writes an introduction of themselves that includes each of the following. As you can see, a kitchen appliance, a menu item, the name of a character from a TV show, an article of clothing, and an animal you might find on a farm. So this is just something to get the creative juices flowing a little bit and to get used to sharing things with each other, even if they're a little bit silly. This kind of activity could be differentiated in a lot of ways. I usually have just a few students, never any more than 10 in the course, and so we talk about these quotations individually, but this is kind of a situation where if you have more students, you could group the students up and assign them to each of these quotations, but each one is about the writing process, especially about writing creatively, and they come from creative writers, famous ones themselves. It's better to fail in originality than to succeed in imitation. Herman Melville, author of Moby Dick. So what you could do is you could have students confront in small groups each of these quotations and respond in writing somehow to them. What do they have to say about creative writing and the creative process itself? And how does it ring true with your experiences of creative writing and creativity? I've got Chekhov there, who was responding to a young writer asking him that famous question, "Is my writing any good?" Which seems to annoy artists, and he responds, "You confuse two things, solving a problem and stating a problem correctly. It's only the second that is obligatory for the artist." Then that second bullet there is one that one of my classes chose to sort of be the theme of the class, to be nobody but yourself. In a world which is doing its best day and night to make you everybody else means to fight the hardest battle which any human being can fight and never stop fighting. The American poet E.E. Cummings. And so, speaking of poetry, I try to work in some poetry on that first night. Here's a little Emily Dickinson poem that's also about creative writing and why it's necessary to tell all the truth but tell it slant. And that's what we do when we write poems or songs or stories. We tell the truth, but we tell it in a way that dazzles gradually through entertainment and through thoughtful engagement. I also bring with me a couple poems about writing. For this last one that happened in March, I had The Writer, which is a poem about it compares the writing process to a bird that's caught in a house, and when the bird finally finds its way out, that's when the idea finds its way out of your imagination. And I just think it's a really good analogy, and also the idea of constantly risking absurdity by Lawrence Ferlinghetti, which we are always doing as creative writers. Oops, I didn't get it there, but that's a good one that maybe I can find and put a good link on to show us, because it compares the poet specifically in this one to a trapeze artist who's trying to catch the truth as it flies through the air. And I always feel like that when I'm writing, especially doing something from my imagination, that I'm risking absurdity, but it's in that risk process that the joy comes, and I'm inviting all of my students to take those risks and to get used to constantly risking absurdity in the class. Then we take some time to talk about the mission statement of the course, and I never really wrote a statement, but I did have 5 keywords that I want them to always remember. These are the things that we are about, which are to inspire, to create, to explore, to improve, and to discover. If we can do those things each night, I think we've had a valuable class. I also involve them in the rules, basically over the years, we have collected 5 rules that everybody seems to agree on. Be respectful of the work of others, be open to constructive criticism, be able to give constructive criticism. No one is to be intimidated or ridiculed, and always express your ideas, because ideas are valued, and this is a place where we respect and honor the ideas of each other. The essential question, I invite them to respond in the form of a paragraph to this question: how can creative writing class meet your needs as a creative person? And I give them about 5 minutes or so to reply to that and kind of develop a direction for themselves. My course is designed for adults who have come to the course with various needs, and I'd like for them to, as early on as possible, to clarify those needs. What is it that they want to get out of this, and how can I address that as the instructor? I could see that kind of question being applicable and relevant at any level, though, any age. Then we do a little discussion on the types of creative writing. There are so many. I started with poetry, short stories, novels, plays, screenplays, memoirs or journals, and songs, and then I invite them to think of other ways that creative writing manifests itself, and of course the opportunities are varied and multiple, but I think it's good for us to start talking about what it is we might want to produce. Am I here maybe hoping I can learn to write a short story? Am I here to advance a novel idea that I have? Am I interested in songwriting, and do I want to develop that skill? So always trying to think about the needs of the learner as a creative person and the agenda that they might not have clarified in their minds yet. And then I think it's time to look at a mentor text. And I call this a template for a poem. This is a famous little poem by George Ella Lyons, and it's the Where I'm From poem. I think this is a good one to start with because it comes from a memory from the past, and I'm going to be inviting them to think about their past frequently as it's comfortable. You know, I don't, and I tell students on the first night, many of us have memories from our past that are uncomfortable, and I'm not asking you to go anywhere that's uncomfortable. But this poem goes to a place really of nostalgia. You'll notice the author uses the I am from structure. I am from clothespins, from Clorox and carbon tetrachloride. I am from the dirt under the back porch. And there's very tactical or tactile and vivid imagery that's mixed in. Black, glistening, it tastes like beets. I'm from the forsythia bush, the Dutch elm. All of these things are from the poet's past, and finishes with I am from those moments snapped before I budded, leaf fall from the family tree. When you're seeing in this lesson all of these poems, I'm always reading them out loud and inviting the students after I finish to comment on what their experience with the poem was. Sometimes this takes a long time because they want to talk in detail about some of the things that were moving. So I always leave some space there, some contingency in my planning in case we want to dwell on the poem analysis a little more deeply. So we read the poem, and then I share with them what the template is. I am from, and you write a specific ordinary item, comma, from, and you write a product name and something else. I am from the, and you put in a description of a home with 2 adjectives and a sensory detail. So you can see in younger students or in an ELA class how you could use an activity like this to reinforce some grammatical knowledge, but also to give the students an opportunity to apply things from their own experience to a creative composition. And I think that's the most valuable thing here. And you come out of this with a poem that's about yourself, if you followed the template. And I think it's very rewarding. And we always, at the end, will share what we've written up. I want early on to get them used to sharing their work. And then I get to the part of the lesson where, and I outline the times on the written part of the lesson, but we're getting to the place where I get to decide what I'm going to do, because we've only got about 30 minutes left in the class on that first night, if it's run on schedule. So I get to decide probably whether to do blackout poetry, which is taking a piece of text, a page of text, and blacking out everything except the words you really want to keep, and what you wind up with is an original poem. And there's a couple examples there. I'll always have the supplies. I'll have Sharpies and some pages from old novels that I've pulled out, and I'll bring to class, and each student gets to do this hands-on activity. The trick is not imposing your own meaning on the poem. The best blackout poems are ones that seem like they've written themselves, because the words have sort of emerged as you blacked out. Another fun activity and hands-on activity that we do is found poetry, where an author finds words or phrases and puts them together in a unique way that creates a poem. And I'll have cardstock that the students can work with, and old magazines, and scissors and glue, and they pull out phrases, usually from headlines in the magazines, and they put them together on the cardstock and make a poem that they can take home from that first night. And it's being willing to tap into the creative imagination in us, and to be an agent of it, instead of imposing our will on it. And it's fascinating to see what kind of unexpected poetry can come from that. And then they can take that, and you can basically do it with anything. You can do it with an old book. You can do it with billboards that you see driving down the road. You can do it with an instruction manual. You can do it with emails or memes that you find online. I know some of the great songs ever written started with found poetry. For example, the Beatles did that a lot, and I'll share some of those examples of how they just found a phrase and turned it into an original work. And then finally, I always give them a homework assignment, but it's the same thing every night, which is you can do what I suggest, or you can continue to work on something that is in your writing agenda, something that you've already selected as a project for yourself. I'll always have this jar that I've got that has slips of paper in it, and you reach in and you just grab a random piece of paper, and it's got a topic on it, like write a story about a blind date, or write a story about a Christmas that went wrong, or just something like that. And it challenges you to try to write something dictated to you. And I find that when you put yourself in this creative writing course, when you put yourself in a position of ambiguity or uncertainty or even discomfort, that some really cool creative things come out of it.